17th. Nice and sunny outside. It's been a lovely week here in the Orkney Islands, and not so bad either in Canada, I bet, this time of year, Tim.
Yeah, I've been hearing it's quite hot and sticky over there.
Yeah, very sticky. A bit like when I go to Thailand or Vietnam, it's like that. And no doubt in India too. I wonder if the heat has anything to do with people's behaviour. Like in the summer they're a bit more Talmudic and Freemasonry, and in the winter they're more sort of, oh, I can't be bothered, it's too cold to moan and be evil. Or are they like that all year round? I would suppose.
Yeah, our temperament heats up in the summer, along with the heat. Yeah, that's maybe so. There's maybe a corollary there, Andy.
Well, talking about Indians and Freemasons, then we might as well talk about one of the famous ones, or many of them. I don't know what you have there.
Yeah, I wrote I co-authored a book about Gandhi called Gandhi Under Cross-Examination. I wasn't satisfied with the book though because my co-author wasn't keen on mentioning too much about Freemasonry in the main text. He preferred to have those as footnotes, and they didn't appear in the book in a way that satisfied me that the message was being delivered to the reader about the role of Freemasonry in Gandhi and in India and in the division of India and Pakistan by Gandhi, and those efforts of Freemasonry to interfere in Indian politics and nationhood. I am deeply offended by the interference of, the Western world in Indian history. I just feel that Gandhi has been wrongfully promoted as a hero of independence when he, in fact, prolonged Indian rule. He prolonged British rule in India by 40 years. He delayed Indian independence by 40 years, and he's responsible for the vivisection of the country with the division of India and Pakistan. And he, according to Notaram Godse, the assassin of Gandhi, whose testimony is, he conducted his own defense in court, and his testimony was banned from public view for a good many decades. And it's only recently, through my efforts, that has come to light. And I'm going to be publishing a book in which Gandhi is featured as a chapter in the book, as a subject that needs to be shared, so that people understand the full extent of Freemason interference in Indian politics in the time of Gandhi, and in fact after the time of Gandhi, through the Congress Party. Now, there was a book that was published, Masoni Società a Responsabilità Illuminata, La Scoperta della Orloges. And that book was one of the biggest exposés of Freemasonry after 1990. It was written by Italian Freemason Giulio Megaldi, founder and venerable master of Freemason Lodge Grand Orient d'Italia Democratico, which means he was a member of the Grand Orient Freemasonry. Grand Orient is a secret society. Freemasonry is a secret society. Some lodges fused and became known as Grand Orient Freemasonry. I can just tell you that the Grand Orient Lodge is an Illuminati lodge. So when you hear about Grand Orient Freemasonry, realize that the Illuminati have infiltrated Freemasonry through the Grand Lodge, through the Grand Orient Lodge. All right. And it's interesting that Gandhi and Nehru, both prominent Indian leaders, both of them were members of the Talmudic super lodge Arjuna Phoenix. That means that these Talmudic Illuminati Grand Orient Freemasons drew Gandhi into this Talmudic super lodge Arjuna Phoenix. Now, the role of the Talmud is important here to explain. The Talmud is a Judaic text. It's regarded by the Judaic religion as being, it's regarded by Judaism as being a sacred text of greater importance than the Torah. It repudiates and denies the validity of the 10 Commandments of the Torah and actually endorses breaking all of the 10 Commandments. So as a text, it completely annuls the value of the Torah. I think it's been very damaging to Judaism. I oppose the Talmud very strongly. I think it's an evil book. I think it's a satanic book. I don't want to be politically correct and just deny the truth simply because I want to avoid the stigma of being accused of being anti-Jewish or whatever. I mean, they say anti-Semitic. The Jews are a mixed bag of people that are of no strict identifiable racial category. So to say Semitic, that most Jews are not Semitic. Most Jews are not Arab in origin. So, anti-Semitic is a kind of misnomer because, the state of Israel is actually comprised, from what I have read, of about 80% Khazarian. The people population are Khazarian by extraction. And so to be labeled anti-Semitic for criticizing Judaism is, to me, it's a misnomer. There's no basis realistically for calling someone this or labeling someone that. Anyway, Arjuna Phoenix is the name of the Talmudic super lodge that both Gandhi and Nehru belong to. And let's just look at the name Arjuna Phoenix. It's hyphenated. Arjuna was the hero of the Bhagavad Gita, which is contained in the Mahabharata, one of the Vedic scriptures. And the Bhagavad Gita is seen as a key sacred text in the Hindu religion. Arjuna is tasked with opposing the Pandava family, which is in fact his own family, in warfare, and he is reluctant to enter the field of battle because he doesn't want to kill his own blood relatives. Well, who would? And that's totally understandable. But Krishna appears on the battlefield miraculously and encourages Arjuna, and he instructs him on how he's fearful of entering the battlefield because he suffers from too much attachment to his body. So Arjuna is told to liberate himself from this attachment, and to realize that he is not his physical body. He is an eternal soul, an Atma, and that nothing can kill him. No spear, no arrow, nothing can pierce his soul. Though his body might perish in battle, his soul is eternal and will prevail and will be reincarnated innumerable times and will be eternal and immortal and unassailable. And he's told not to fear for his relatives, for though they also may die in battle, their souls are also eternal, and they will be reincarnated innumerable times, and their souls' existence will prevail regardless of what happens in the course of battle. So in essence, he's just told to be brave and to go and do his duty as a Kshatriya, which means as a member of the warrior caste. It is his duty to fight in this battle on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So Arjuna, phoenix hyphenated, means that Arjuna has risen again. And so these figures, Gandhi and Nehru, are being depicted as Arjuna, phoenix rising. The great hero of the Bhagavad Gita has presumably reincarnated in Gandhi and in Nehru, and there are a resurrection or a phoenix reborn. Arjuna is a phoenix reborn in these two figures from Indian history and political history. Okay, so Gandhi founded this Arjuna Phoenix Talmudic Super Lodge in 1904. Now, Nathuram Godse, who is the assassin of Gandhi, conducted his own defense on the murder charge related to the assassination of Gandhi. He was not just charged on the basis of, murder. He was charged with other offenses, which he chose to defend himself against. While he confessed to the murder of Gandhi, he defended himself on other charges brought against him, denying these charges and stating that he was innocent on all those other counts. In the course of his defense, he wanted the court to understand that his actions concerning the assassination of Gandhi were, from his standpoint, justified because, well, he accused Gandhi of being a traitor to India. He accused him of abandoning the Hindu population of India and In his policy of appeasement, he seemed to be showing favor towards Muslims, even going on hunger strikes on certain occasions in favor of Muslim in favor of the Muslim population. What was happening is that the Muslim League, which was a terrorist organization, which had its headquarters in London, strangely enough, he was in regular correspondence with the head of the Muslim League. I've read the letters that Gandhi exchanged with the leader of the Muslim League, which means that he was in regular correspondence with a terrorist. And I believe it is MI6, which has a strong Talmudic Zionist influence. I believe that MI6 was behind the creation of this terrorist organization known as the Muslim League. And not surprisingly, it established its headquarters in London, England, showing that there is a connection here with the British Empire and with British Freemasonry and presumably the Grand Lodge of England. So, also, Lord Ampthill was the head of the Grand Lodge of England, and Gandhi was in communication with Lord Ampthill, and he asked Lord Ampthill to write the foreword for fellow Freemason J.J. Dock's book about Gandhi, the biography of Gandhi. And so that biography, written by his fellow Freemason and intimate friend, Reverend J.J. Dock, is responsible for making Gandhi the famous and revered figure that he is, because Gandhi paid for the 600 copies of this biography to be printed and then sent them to the major news agencies in Europe and in North America, so that his reputation as a kind of hero figure was established through his own effort and the effort of Freemasons, Reverend J.J. Dock and Lord Ampthill, to make him into a kind of martyr figure who ostensibly was persecuted on board a train, but my co-author and I showed that the so-called racial train and coach incidents that were supposed to have happened to Gandhi were fabricated. He had 4 historical accounts of these racial train and coach incidents written decades apart, and none of the documentary evidence corroborates. It's a strange thing, because Gandhi was a lawyer, trained as a lawyer, and functioned as a lawyer in South Africa, and no one should know better than a lawyer the necessity of having documentary evidence, which you provide, corroborating. Yet none of the 4 accounts he gives of the racial training coach incidents do corroborate. I don't want to get into that too much, because that's what the purpose of the book Gandhi Under Cross-Examination was. Largely, it was an effort to discredit these these claims made by Gandhi, the evidence would show that the incidents that he describes as having happened to him, in fact, happened to one of his plaintiffs that he was defending in a legal suit, and that they didn't actually happen to him. At any rate, Notaram Godse, the assassin of Gandhi, also claims that he was conspiring with the Emir of Afghanistan to front an invasion of India in order to found a Muslim caliphate. And Godse, whose brother, Gopal Godse, published his courtroom testimony in a book called Gandhi Under Cross-Examination, basically details all of his brother's courtroom testimony in this book, which was banned and suppressed by the Congress Party of India for decades and has only in the last few years come to light. Of course, I have read Gopal Godse's book, May It Please Your Honor, and I have written a chapter about Gandhi in my book, which I hope to publish this year, which is called Shakespeare's Codex, All the World Staged and We Are Merely Played. Now, we know that Gandhi was in contact with the head of the Muslim League, and we know that he was engaged in a policy of appeasement concerning the activities of the Muslim League in Bengal, and many Hindus, men, women, and children were being slaughtered in the streets by this terrorist organization. And far from sending in the military to defend innocent civilians against the attacks of terrorism, Gandhi left them and abandoned them to their fates. He also, Notaram Godse, he shares with the courtroom some of the speeches made by Gandhi concerning the plight of Hindus in various cities in Pakistan where they're being persecuted and slaughtered, quite frankly. And the refugees that fled, trying to escape Pakistan to come to India to seek asylum, he made these absurd speeches about how they should accept their fate and be brave and return to their former residence in Pakistan, and they should embrace their Muslim brothers, and even if their Muslim brothers slaughter them, they should remember the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and be brave and realize that their souls are eternal, and that though they may be slaughtered, though their bodies may be slaughtered, their souls are immortal, and that they should be brave and accept their fate and all this nonsense. And anyone who'd heard the speech and really thought about it would realize, what is he saying? Has he gone mad? Has he lost his marbles? Has he lost his senses? What could he possibly be saying here? What is he really meaning? It's absurd. Logically, philosophically, his argument is absolutely absurd. And no wonder Notaram Godse was shocked and offended by the speeches made by Gandhi and sought to share them in the court so that people would see that their must be some justification for his opposition to Gandhi as a leader in India, and he defended his actions on the basis of, I'm sorry, but I couldn't help it. As a Hindu and Indian patriot, I had no recourse but to end the career of this traitor who was doing so much damage to the country. Now, when the sentence against Nathuram Godse was passed at the end of the trial, there was not a dry eye in the courtroom. The gallery of people were very deeply moved and very sorry that this patriot was going to face execution. And I think that many of them realized there was a great deal of truth to the assertions that he made in court. The fact that his testimony had been suppressed for decades, and that Gopal Godse's book, May It Please Your Honor, was banned from publication and distribution for decades, shows that there is an effort to suppress the truth surrounding Gandhi and the assassination of Gandhi. By a coincidence, I met a Freemason in Seoul, Korea, and actually dined with him. And he was a Canadian who had fled Pakistan under fear of for fear of his life, for fear of his safety and the safety of his family. He fled the country and came to settle in Vancouver, Canada. Anyway, I met him and I asked him a few questions that I was curious about, and he answered them. One of the things that he told me was that Benazir Bhutto had been assassinated by Freemasons. And the reason for her assassination was that she refused to cooperate, I suppose you could say. But he was asked specifically to fund her re-election campaign in Pakistan. He was a very high-ranking corporate magnate with a great deal of wealth, and he was asked to fund her campaign for re-election, and he refused. And on that basis, he was seen as a Freemason who had betrayed his brethren. Now, to make it clear, he said Benazir Bhutto was a fellow lodge member at the same Freemason lodge as himself. And I said, what? A woman? I thought that women belong to the Order of the Eastern Star, which is the basically female Freemasonry, and were not inducted into Freemason lodges. And he said, no, very prominent and highly ranked officials who are women are often inducted into Freemason lodges, and she's a clear example of one such. And we were fellow lodge members, and when I refused to give her a contribution for her re-election campaign, I was seen as someone who had betrayed my fellow lodge member, and so I was subjected to the ritual punishment of the third degree. And at that point he showed me the scars here at his temples and the one scar in the middle of his forehead, which correspond to the ritual torture of the third degree. Now, we often hear the term, oh, they gave him the third degree, which is a metaphor for getting a severe grilling or interrogation. But the actual ritual of the third degree is, in fact, a ritual punishment given by Freemasons to fellow Freemasons who are seen as having betrayed the brotherhood or betrayed a fellow lodge member in some way. And it commemorates the third degree of Freemasonry historical figure, Hiram Abiff, who was the alleged architect of King Solomon's temple. And he was in prayers in the temple when 3 ruffians entered the temple and demanded to know the secrets of the third degree, the secrets of the Master Mason degree. And he refused to divulge the secrets to the 3 unworthy craftsmen. Consequently, they cordoned off the exits to the temple and they attacked him. The first of the assassins struck him in the temple with a architectural or Masonic device, I believe a plumb line. And so he was struck in the temple and went down on one knee, then rose again. He then tried to exit through another exit of the temple and was confronted by the second of the unworthy craftsmen, who struck him in the other temple with an architectural device. He then fell again on one knee and rose again, and in the final attempt to escape with his life, he was confronted by the third and final assassin, who cordoned off the exit and wouldn't allow him to pass. He then took a stone maul, a hammer, and struck Hiram Abiff in the middle of the forehead, a fatal blow which caused him to fall to his knees and then completely collapse and fall on his face on the stonemasonry floor of the temple. Thus, Hiram Abiff met his untimely end at the hands of the 3 unworthy craftsmen. Now, this ritual is reenacted in the case of a Freemason who has been seen to have somehow betrayed the Freemason order, the secret society, and somehow betrayed a fellow lodge member. And in this case, the man I met declared that he had been tortured and had just narrowly escaped with his life. He needed reconstructive surgery for his face, some kind of plastic surgery to repair the injuries that he had suffered. So clearly it's an aggravated assault, which damaged his face to the point where he needed reconstructive surgery. Having survived the aggravated assault, he and his family fled Pakistan and came to Canada to seek asylum and to present themselves as refugees, and eventually gained Canadian citizenship. Now, one of the things he told me was that the assassin of Gandhi, Notaram Godse, had been sent by Lincoln's Inn. Now, Gandhi was a member of the Inner Temple in London. And according to this Freemason from Pakistan, the assassin of Gandhi, Notaram Godse, was sent from Lincoln's Inn. There are 5 inns of court in the city of London: the Middle Temple, the Inner Temple, the Outer Temple, Lincoln's Inn, and Gray's Inn. They all have had an influence in British history that is long-standing and goes back several hundred years. The figures that were involved in the Shakespeare plays attended Gray's Inn and actually performed revels there. And I'm referring to Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford, who was an alumni of Gray's Inn, and his half-brother, Francis Bacon, both of whom collaborated to write the Shakespeare plays. Now, I get into this in a chapter on Shakespeare, the authorship, and in my book, Shakespeare's Codex, All the World Staged, and We Are Merely Played. So this pretty much sums up what I wanted to say about Gandhi. Andy, any comment?
Fascinating. It was like I was sitting here, you're telling me a story, you know.
Yeah, it's a long
I
story.
do notice, though,
Yeah.
some of the Freemasonry names, like Gray's Inn, they always seem to turn up as barristers' chambers in later life.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, they are law schools in the city of London, but the Inner Temple is actually a spy training school. So Gandhi, in belonging to the Inner Temple, which ostensibly is a law school, was in fact being trained as a British spy. You also want to consider that since these illustrious law schools had historically had students that were from the British upper class, from the British aristocracy, it's rather surprising to find that Gandhi was inducted into the Inner Temple as a lodge member, both as a foreigner and as someone who is clearly not from the British upper class. So something must have made Gandhi seen as a fit and appropriate inductee of the Inner Temple. Presumably, his Freemason credentials had been acquired while in India, and he was supported by British military officials in being promoted both to the rank of sergeant major within the British Army in South Africa when he was stationed in South Africa, but his career had been strongly supported and backed by these rather high-ranking British officials who would have also been Freemasons. And so, yeah, the 5 inns of court is something that I get into in my book, specifically in the chapter on Gandhi, but also in the chapter on Shakespeare, because we can see that Gray's Inn features prominently in the history behind the Shakespeare plays. A Comedy of Errors was performed in Gray's Inn for the first time in a night of the revels, which means a night of theater. And Comedy of Errors is about two twins that look so much alike that it causes a comedy of errors because the audience can't distinguish between the two twins. Well, this sets up the whole covert operation to disguise the truth about the Shakespeare authorship, because Will Shakespeare, his name bears a striking similarity to William Shakespeare. But though the names appear to be so similar and so alike, to the point of being twins, they couldn't be more dissimilar in terms of their education and class background. Because Will Shakespeare was a commoner from Stratford, and the true authors, Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, and Francis Bacon, were members of the nobility. In fact, both illegitimate sons of Queen Elizabeth I and half-brothers, because though they share the same mother, they had different fathers. Thomas Seymour was the father of Edward de Vere, and Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, was the father of Francis Bacon. Together, the half-brothers collaborated to create the Shakespeare works. Okay, Andy? What shall we do
Talking a
next?
little bit about
Mm-hmm.
Patrick O'Carroll's story, British MI6, top 10 Nazi traitors, or you was interested in that one?
Okay. Just a minute. I don't.
I could send it back on the email.
You sent it to me?
I can send it back, yeah. Because it kind of links up with the Gandhi stuff and the Freemasonry at least.
Okay.
I've just sent it now.
You just send it now?
Because when you was interested in that was quite good too, for my interest.
Okay. I don't have it. You sent it just now? Okay.
Yeah.
Top 20 British MI6 assets in NSDAP Germany. World War II was like a vast movie production expertly scripted by Team Antichrist and masterfully directed by MI6. But most importantly of all, World War II was the single most controlled conflict of all of human history. Now, Patrick O'Connor must be credited with this quite insightful piece about World War II. It's very interesting. Some Nazis admired Britain for genociding 200 million victims, so they wanted to either unite with Britain or else emulate Britain's legendary success in genocide, which had made Britain the world's #1 genocider of all time. If World War II had been a genuine or organic war, it would have lasted at least 15 years, most likely a quarter of a century, 25 plus years. But Team Antichrist could never have stomached such a lengthy war because it would have ruined its plans to finance both sides, and also because the prophecy co-invented by the holy, inverted commas, Rabbi Maimonides in the 1100s, was for the Antichrist state of Israel to be launched in 1948. So Team Antichrist wanted World War II to end roughly 3 years before that all-important deadline of 1948. Overall, the entire timing of World War II is the biggest proof that MI6 totally sabotaged Germany. Fascinating stuff. All right, so an MI6 asset is one you can spot by his deeds. An MI6 asset, on the other hand, is a full-fledged card-carrying MI6 man who has signed his MI6 contract and is an agent for life. The MI5, MI6 double cross system. I should explain the double cross. There's a family called the House of Guise and Lorraine whose coat of arms is the double cross. And you can see that it does actually look like a double cross. There's a main vertical plank and two horizontal planks parallel to each other. And yes, it looks like a double cross. And the double cross became a term used in Freemasonry for when you betray someone. You've effectively double-crossed them. And it comes from the House of Guise and Lorraine, which were an elite Templar family. So they were members of the Knights Templar. Now, historically, both the Knights Templar and their later organization, which became the York Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, that Templar Freemason history has been one of innumerable double crosses, because the House of Guise and Lorraine, as a Templar family, used this as a modus operandi because it enriched them and enriched the Knights Templar greatly, because they would fund one king in his military campaigns by supplying him with gold, with mercenary troops and arms, and then they would turn around and they would grant the same support to his rival, his enemy. And so they were effectively double-crossing both sides and making great deal of profit off the interest they accrued from the lent gold. Now, they didn't actually lend wagon loads of gold to these kings. They would issue promissory notes in the form of a check, and it would be honored at a temple, at a Templar preceptory, which is a primitive bank, basically. And since they controlled the supply of arms and the manufacturing of arms, they would make profits hand over fist, because in exchange for the gold that would be presented to purchase the arms, purchase the weapons, they would then hand over the weapons in exchange for this received check. But there was no gold, not to the extent of what was being promised in the terms of the promissory note. the temple preceptory had a very small supply of gold, and they were lending gold and charging interest on the gold that didn't really exist, because they would lend far more gold than they actually had in supply. And this same banking practice is followed today. It's called fractional reserve lending, where the bank can lend up to 10 times the amount of money they actually have on reserve in their vaults. And they can charge interest on money that doesn't really exist, because they're not able to actually lend money they don't have, but they do anyway because it's legal and it's allowable. And through fractional reserve lending practices, they lend 10 times more than the actual amount of money they have on reserve in their vaults. So effectively, banks are charging interest on air, on money that doesn't exist, and demanding repayment in the form of collateral if you fail on repaying your debts. But this whole debt usury system is based on a fraud, because the money that's being lent doesn't actually exist. In today's terms, it's just digital loans that are being transferred and shown on a computer screen. And is there any validity to the money that is being lent? In essence, it doesn't really exist. The whole thing is a fraud, yet that doesn't stop them from charging interest on the money that they have ostensibly lent to the loan recipient. So this is the history of the banking industry, which was set up and created in the 13th century by the Knights Templar, and which their later incarnation, Freemasonry, continued right down till today. So in World War I and World War II, but especially in World War II, the British demonstrated that they were the absolute masters of statecraft. So poor Germany never really stood a chance. Starting in 1933, the MI5, MI6 double-cross system began blackmailing top German operatives to become first and foremost British MI6 agents. The upshot was that approximately 5% of Germany's top officials was working for Team Antichrist throughout World War II. And although it was only about 5% of the top cadre, MI6 still managed to place these unfaithful few in immensely important positions. Adolf Hitler committed over 75 deliberate military blunders in favor of the Zionist powers. Who are these Zionist powers? US, Great Britain, Russia, and France, to ensure that World War II would end early, 3 years before the most crucial Team Antichrist deadline, which was to found the State of Israel in 1948. And also to boost the German Holocaust death toll to 37 million. MI6 agent Führer and Reich Kanzler Adolf Hitler. According to most sources, Hitler was brainwashed in London, Liverpool, Dublin, and Vienna, this being the Tavistock or Illuminati mind control centers at the time. In Greg Hallett's book, published in 2005, Hitler was a British agent. You can find some of this information. Andy, you've got a link here that you have in this article. Maybe you could share that so that people can read the link to Greg Hallett's book, Hitler Was a British Agent.
Yeah, I'll put that in the description later on.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Plus, at the end of what you're talking about, I'll read a little bit out, which links it all up, and you've touched it a little bit. I'll read out Team Antichrist may be preparing to massively revalue gold, because all the articles are sort of interconnected. So I'll do that after you're finished.
Yeah, I saw that article. It's very interesting as well. On the 20th of November 1917, at Cambrai in northern France, Hitler was captured in the trenches along with other Germans. The British troops, part of the Royal Green Jacket Regiment, were on orders to take no prisoners, and they began slaughtering. Hitler was about to be terminated when a British intelligence officer ran up and said, "Oh no, 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 not that man." And Hitler was allowed to return to his own lines. Twice during World War I, Hitler was saved on orders of a British intelligence officer. Clearly, the British regime wanted its valuable MI6 asset, Adolf Hitler, a little bit, but not too much, in harm's way, so as to bolster his German patriot credentials. But twice it stepped in to save his life, because he was in fact a British agent. Amazing. I should also mention that intelligence officer ran up and said, "Isn't it awful when you got an idea and then it slips away?" I can't think of what I was going to say.
Well, it proves it's not rehearsed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they call it old age.
Yeah, maybe. Hitler, his role in the war seems quite duplicitous, and the so-called suicide that was alleged to have taken place, where he and Eva Braun committed suicide, that was staged. That was a double of Hitler and presumably Braun that died in the bunker. It was not Hitler. And Hitler and Braun both escaped, took an overnight flight to Italy, and then took a U-boat all the way to Argentina. Not only did Hitler survive the war, but he continued to live on in Argentina as part of the effort of Bormann and the rat lines to get the higher ranking German officials out of the country at the end of the war. Okay, so MI6 agent, Deputy Führer Martin Bormann, was a triple agent for three powers: the DE, Great Britain, and Russia. After Marx Warburg left Germany in 1938, Bormann became Hitler's main MI6 handler. Hitler covered for Triple Agent Bormann when the non-NSDAP Wehrmacht caught him sending radio signals to Moscow's Kremlin and KGB. In May 1945, Team Antichrist gave Bormann and Hitler their freedom, but Hitler remained embittered because Bormann took full control of Germany in the summer of 1944. Bormann had the signature of the bank accounts of most of the loot of the NSDAPs that most of the loot of that the NSDAP had stolen for its bosses in Team Antichrist from throughout occupied Europe. In 1939 to 45, Alan Dulles ran the Axis for Bern, Switzerland, and his law firm Sullivan and Cromwell laundered his loot into 750 companies that Bormann had created, and many Jews installed as their CEOs to disguise the fact that they were in fact NSDAP-linked companies that were ultimately owned by Team Antichrist. Yeah, John and Alan Dulles, former Nazis, founded the CIA, and they were connected with the effort known as Project Paperclip to bring many of the higher ranking Nazis over to carry on business as usual, working for the CIA after the war. MI6 asset Admiral Wilhelm Canaris was a powerful and prominent German trader who was a known MI6 asset. As head of the Abwehr, counterintelligence, Canaris was in a position to commit truly incredible sabotage. At the invasion of Russia, German troops captured a vital cache of official documents that Russian administrators had failed to destroy or evacuate. But Canaris, his lackey Oster, and others hid this prized hoard in Angerburg, East Prussia, and never gave it to Hitler or the OKW through all of World War II. In his memoirs, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz confirmed the Abwehr delivered not a single useful report about the enemy throughout the entire war. MI6 asset Reich Marshal Hermann Wilhelm Göring. Göring founded the Gestapo in 1933 and headed the Luftwaffe in 1935 to 45. MI6 knew that Göring was corruptible, noting that he was much more interested in positions than paid money than in war. He was much more interested in positions that paid money than in war. So Hermann Göring, overextended financially as he was, building a mansion in Brandenburg, so MI6 spy Frederick Wilhelm Winterbottom offered to pay to complete it. If Göring would sell MI6 the counts and totals of the aircraft built. In the process, MI6 made Göring an MI6 asset and bugged Carinhall with listening devices so that MI6 could spy on OKW meetings throughout World War II, especially secret meetings held in the Carinhall crypt. Throughout World War II, Göring received daily Air Force brown sheets. After he read these at breakfast, Göring would pass them to his MI6 bosses, but he kept the most important ones hidden from the Luftwaffe. This helped British air intelligence to know a lot of German air power data. Göring ran very many MI6 spies, even including Kyle Canal lockkeepers, whom MI6 employed to pass information to Britain, since all German U-boats had to traverse his canal. One of the most incredible deliberate military blunders that Hitler committed in World War II was simply giving up the Battle of Britain. Although Germany had all but completely won it. After a harmless British bombing raid on Berlin on August 25th, 1940, MI6 assets Hitler and Göring pretended to fly into a rage to justify ditching the Battle of Britain and switching from efficiently obliterating Britain's airfields to instead pointlessly bombing the civilians in London. When Germany gave up on the Battle of Britain, this was the single weakest and most illogical plot twist in the entire MI6 movie script. It was so illogical and dumb that it should have lost MI6 the Oscar for Best Screenplay. Göring had so many MI6 ties that the Zionist Nuremberg show trials were obliged to sentence him to death. If his true story had gotten out in 1946, the whole world would have known that World War II had been a staged motion directed by MI6. You know, I have a friend, um, Michael, and he looked at a lot of the photographs of World War II and realized that they were fake, like uh, these photographs showing bombs dropping out of the bomb bay of aircraft, and they're all dropping in a straight line. You know, given wind velocity and given the speed of these aircraft and how fast they're flying and everything, the bombs would not be dropping down in a straight line. And when he examined the photographs closely, it was clear that the bombs were actually attached to a rope ladder and that they were just dropped from the bomb bay down as if they were bombs being actually dropped upon targets on the ground, when in fact it was all just stage managed. It was just all of these bombs being let down through the bomb bay doors on a ladder. It was theatrics. That's all it was. It's a little bit like the many efforts that the Allies fake uh, armies on the battlefield, where they had inflated tanks that were put in position, and when in a distance, actually. Oh, okay, just a second.
Okay.
Hear me? Sorry, Mari had to
Yeah,
make
cool.
Mari had to make an adjustment there on the computer. So if I was cut off for a few moments, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. He was loud and clear.
This is very interesting, though. Göring had so many MI6 ties that the Zionist Nuremberg show trials were obliged to sentence him to death. For if his true story had gotten out in 1946, the whole world would have known that World War II had been a stage-managed motion picture directed by MI6. It's very common, isn't it, for these people that are intelligence assets to end up dying before they can testify in a trial, so that damaging information that would be extremely damaging to the intelligence community is suppressed.
Oops.
I should mention what I was going to mention earlier is that when Trotsky, whose real name was Bronstein, so it's not Leon Trotsky, but in fact Lev Bronstein, he was a German Jew, and he was training the Bolshevik revolutionaries in the United States, and he was given a passport by Woodrow Wilson, the president at the time, to seek passage back to Russia. But he was stopped in Halifax by Canadian immigration police and was held. And this British MI6 officers came along and told the Canadian immigration police to let him go, Bronstein. He was given considerable money for the training of these Bolshevik revolutionaries in the United States, and the money came from the Schiff family, which was a Rothschild affiliated New York banking establishment family. So Trotsky was let go and was able to escape and get back to Russia with his fellow revolutionaries because of the intervention of MI6 in Halifax, Nova Scotia. That was mentioned in an article by Colonel Maclean of Canada's well-known magazine, Maclean's magazine. And it's mentioned in an article by Colonel Maclean. How Canada lost its chance to shorten the war. Why did Canada let Trotsky go? Yeah, that's the name of the article. MI6 agent Grand Admiral Karl Donitz. Hallett relates how the British captured Karl Donitz on October 4th, 1918, and placed him in a psych ward in Manchester, England, where he was turned into an MI6 agent to be activated when required. After 9.5 months of training, he was released in July 1919. Donitz was a U-boat commander who knew the secrets of German Antarctica. The Germans occupied a place in Antarctica called Neuschwabenland. And you've probably heard about the story, Andy, of Admiral Byrd and the U.S. military involvement in Antarctica.
I watched a lot of the films.
Did you?
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting stuff, isn't it?
Is that Richard, I believe?
Richard Byrd?
Richard. Are we talking Richard Byrd?
Yeah.
BYRD.
Yeah, that's right. Admiral Byrd. So, there are a few YouTube videos about that. Isn't it? It's quite interesting, eh?
Yeah, like a good old war film or war video, especially the ones in Antarctica or in Norway,
Yeah, it's pretty interesting,
in the
isn't it?
cold countries.
Okay, so MI6 asset Major General Hans Paul Oster. Within the Abwehr, Hans Oster was the treasonous deputy and top conspirator of MI6 asset Wilhelm Canaris. In April-May 1940, before Germany's campaigns in Norway and the Netherlands, Oster leaked the entire detailed German plans to both nations, but neither trusted them as They did not expect such treachery from any Germans, so neither of them used these plans in their military defense. Together with Chamberlain, Oster worked on a proposal called 1938 Oster Conspiracy to assassinate Hitler, but this was ditched after the October 1938 Munich Agreement. MI6 asset Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop. This is a very interesting name, Joachim, because the twin pillars of the Temple of Solomon were known as Joachim and Boaz. So this seems to be a Freemason name given to this MI6 asset, Joachim von Ribbentrop. He was the NSDAP ambassador to Britain in 1936 to 38. He had so many MI6 ties with the Zionist Nuremberg show trials. He had so many MI6 ties that the Zionist Nuremberg show trials were obliged once again to sentence him to death. If his true story had gotten out, the whole world would have known in 1946 that World War II had been a vast stage-managed MI6 movie production. Hallett alleged that von Ribbentrop had an affair with Wallace Simpson, who passed him top-secret details, adding Wallace Simpson was investigated by the FBI in 1941 for passing information to von Ribbentrop. MI6 asset for Theodor Morell, MD. Hitler's personal physician, Theodor Morell, was an MI6 asset who helped to keep Hitler under MI6 mind control in the years 1933 to 45, giving all the drugs required. Hitler showed clear signs of the effects of these drugs as he rocked back and forth incessantly at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. And you can actually see a YouTube video of this. So MI6 asset General Erich Feldgiebel. General Erich Feldgiebel was a member of the German resistance and the communications chief at Hitler's headquarters in Berlin. After Germany invaded Russia, Feldgiebel installed a direct phone line from Hitler's headquarters to Bern, Switzerland, to send classified information to MI6 asset Hans Gesivius, a Gestapo airbar villain who relayed it to Moscow. Germany's SD, which stands for Sicherheitsdienst, later nicknamed this leak of over 500 detailed reports the Red Orchestra. Okay. And MI6 asset Gestapo official Hans Bernd Gesivius, stationed in Bern, Switzerland, Gestapo man Hans Gesivius conspired with the Abwehr by relaying the 500-plus Red Orchestra reports from Hitler's headquarters to the Kremlin so as to ensure that MI6 was keeping Russia up to date. In his 2017 book, Hitler's Revolution, Richard Tidor quotes Gesivius, later boasting of how MI6 had the German military leaking like a sieve, when he stated, "We had our spies all over the War Ministry, in the police, in the Ministry of the Interior, and especially in the Foreign Office, all threads connected to Oster." MI6 asset resistance recruiter Karl Friedrich Goerdeler. Rudolf Rössler fingered Karl Goerdeler for his involvement in the Abwehr's vast Red Orchestra leak. Goerdeler later took part in the 20th of July plot to overthrow Hitler in 1944, which, had it succeeded, would merely have left MI6 agent Bormann in control, meaning that MI6 actually viewed this plot quite neutrally or dispassionately. Okay, you want to talk about any of these, Andy?
Yeah, I was just going to link it with the gold. The Team Antichrist may be preparing to massively revalue gold.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this article is by Colin Wise or Wise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it. This was the 1st of August 25. It's on the website of the private bank called US Federal Reserve. A link will be in the description as well. And it talks about international and US gold revaluation over the course of a matter of months. Mike Adams speculates that the US regime will soon revalue gold to $12,000 US per ounce. That may bring a silver price of somewhere between $200 and $500 US per ounce. Others speculate that the US regime will soon revalue gold to $30,000 US per ounce. Capital letters, no one knows, but the overt US debt can be wiped out if gold is $150,000 US per ounce. The covert US debt off balance sheet debt is being reduced by genocide. Mike Adams says the juncture when the gold will be revalued will be 9 months after the imminent passage of what is misleadingly titled the Bitcoin Act, and that every $4,000 revaluation of the gold price will bring the US regime $1 trillion with which to starve off the collapse of the neo-fascist US empire.
The Zio-fascist US empire,
sorry. The higher the gold price, the longer the Zio-fascist US empire can stay alive. This would be a financial trick similar to the October 1973 launch of the petrodollar, which gave the US regime 50 more years of the world's leading Zio-bully thug. All this goes to show that Team Antichrist still has a lot of financial wizardry with which it can at least attempt to starve off bankruptcy, but none of this will save the middle class, which Team Antichrist wants to destroy. Mainly by murder, the genocide of most US slaves is already pre-programmed because of the 80% uptake of the COVID bioweapon jab during the COVID farmer genocide after Trump's Operation Warp Speed. There's a Bishop video, and it says basically Adams says Trump is willing to sacrifice the US dollar in order to save the US debt market treasuries. Furthermore, Trump's tariffs are really about reducing US imports so that US GDP will skyrocket and foreigners will suddenly view US debt as an attractive investment, thus helping the USA to rise like a proverbial phoenix. Adams opines that folks may only have about 12 months to stack gold and silver because the Zio-fascist Trump may well pass this misleadingly titled Bitcoin Act sometime in the coming 3 months. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of numbers there, but in a nutshell, I can't understand. It's obviously a president's job or a country's job to get more money, so they have less debt, they make more money, they make things themselves, so they don't have to rely on other countries. And of course, isn't that what's meant to happen? Trump is doing that. Well, he's trying to do that anyway with the tariffs.
Right.
But the article suggests he's doing the opposite. But yeah, I'm confused. A little update on the war. I mean, you've probably seen that they did meet in Alaska. So instead of Trump selling Ukraine's land for Zelensky, he's bullying Zelensky now to sell his own land to Putin, which He's not right, really. He's a war criminal, and that although people want the war to stop, they shouldn't have. They shouldn't have.
Yeah. Hello, Andy. Andy, hello.
Oh, sorry. I think what happens is my volume keeps muting.
Okay.
What did you last hear? What did you last hear, Tim?
You were saying something about another claim of Mike Adams. Trump is willing to sacrifice the U.S. dollar in order to save the U.S. debt market, treasuries, etc. Furthermore, Trump's tariffs are really about reducing U.S. imports so that U.S. GDP will skyrocket and foreigners will suddenly view U.S. debt as an attractive investment, thus helping the USA rise like a proverbial phoenix.
But my comment was, and I don't think you heard, surely Trump's job is to make the country better off.
Yes.
He is supposed to put tariffs, so all the stuff is grown or made in the US, so he makes a profit. The article suggests he's doing the opposite when what Trump is doing, what the national media tells you Trump's doing, he's trying to just build the economy and lessen the debt for the country.
Right.
So that article to me was confusing, but anybody with a financial head would understand. Then I went on to say Putin and Trump met in Alaska, and Trump, obviously said, "Well, I can't sell Zelensky's land because no one will forgive me. So what I'll do is instead we'll come up with no deal, and I'll bully Zelensky and meet me tomorrow Monday, and make him sell his own land to Putin, who's a war criminal. We want the war to stop, but we shouldn't be treating war criminals with red carpets. That is something Trump may have done wrong, but hey,
Right.
It's all about the money, though, isn't it? This is the point.
Yeah.
No one is actually doing that for the love of God or the love of people. They're doing it for money, power, or fame.
Right. I got it. Okay, Andy, I think we'll end there. Thank you very much for today.
Yeah, no problem. We wrapped them 3 articles up. It was brilliant.
Okay.